Thou hast made all things, and power over all things hast thou, and all things are naked and open in thy sight, and thou seest all things, and nothing can hide itself from thee. Thou seest what Azazel hath done, who hath taught all unrighteousness on earth, and revealed the eternal secrets, which were preserved in heaven, which men were striving to learn. And Semjaza, to whom thou hast given authority to bear rule over his associates, and they have gone to the daughters of men upon the earth, and have slept with the women, and have defiled themselves, and revealed to them all kinds of sins. And the women have borne giants, and the whole earth has thereby been filled with blood and unrighteousness. Now behold, the souls of those who have died are crying and making their suit to the gates of heaven, and their lamentations have ascended, and cannot cease because of the lawless deeds which are wrought on the earth. And thou knowest all things before they come to pass. And thou seest these things, and thou dost suffer them. And thou dost not say to us what we are to do to them in regard to these. Book of Enoch, chapter 9.
Hello, and welcome to part 1 of a series of videos wherein I'll be delving deep into the Nephilim mythos, attempting to unveil the mysterious origins of those tyrannical giants of Earth's distant past. In this video, I'll be attempting to answer 2 questions. Who were the Nephilim, and why are they referred to as giants within the Old Testament? The Nephilim are first mentioned in the book of Genesis, the first book of the Old Testament. The Old Testament is the Christian name for the Jewish holy book known as the Tanakh. Genesis 6 reads as follows.
Now it came to pass when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves of all whom they chose.
Following this, God declares that man will live no longer than 120 years. The passage then continues on to say,
There were giants on the earth in those days, and also afterward when the sons of God came in to the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old, men of renown.
There are a couple of key points from these passages that warrant further investigation. The first being the term Sons of God. Sons of God is a translation of the Hebrew term Bene Elohim. The earliest source we have referencing this term outside of Genesis is found in the Apocrypha Book of Enoch, written somewhere within the 3rd century BC, roughly around the time the Septuagint was being created. The Septuagint being the Tanakh written in Koine Greek. It is consensus among scholars that during the Second Temple period, the Book of Enoch was widely read within Jewish communities, and arguably considered canon to the Judaic faith, with Jude, apostle and brother to Jesus himself, directly quoting from Enoch. My focus today is on the beginning of the first book of Enoch, which describes the fall of the sons of God, also known as the Watchers, angelic beings that forsook heaven in order to take human wives. According to the book of Enoch, the Watchers were a group of 200 angels, although this could be referring to the number of chiefs, not necessarily the total number. Judging by their title, we can presume they were tasked with watching over Earth and humanity. The foremost leader of the Watchers is an angel named Semjaza, his name meaning, I have seen the name. Semjaza gathers the 200 chief angels at Mount Hermon, which is located today on the border between Lebanon and Syria. Fearing that the other angels will not follow him in rebellion, Semjaza gives the following proclamation.
I fear ye will not indeed agree to do this deed, and I alone shall have to pay the penalty of a great sin.
Having said this, his brothers reply,
Let us all swear an oath and all bind ourselves by mutual imprecations not to abandon this plan, but to do this thing.
Having sworn their oaths, the angels enacted their scheme to take wives and rule over humanity as kings. According to Enoch, the Watchers not only ruled mankind, but also taught them forbidden arts such as astrology, mythology, cosmetics, and pharmacology. It is from their union with human women that the giants are spawned. The next key point from Genesis I want to analyze is the term Nephilim, or as it has been translated into English, giants. The common consensus is that the word Nephilim translates as fallen, or fallen ones, although the precise meaning is still debated. While this is an apt term for the rebellious angels, it holds no connotation to the term giant. So how did giants come to be associated with the Nephilim? The Septuagint was edited by authors who decided that the Greek word gigantes was a more accurate noun than the term fallen ones. The Greeks, however, already had a word for fallen ones, that being peptokotes. So why didn't the Septuagint authors use this word? To answer that question, we need to look at the word within the cultural context of the period. In the 3rd century BC, Greek culture and language was dominant across the known world. From Rome to Egypt, stretching all the way to the eastern frontiers of the Seleucid Empire, Greek culture was dominant. Just as English is the lingua franca of our time, for those living during the Hellenic period, Koine Greek was theirs. Although we don't know for certain the true origin of the Septuagint's creation, most scholars now hold the opinion that the Septuagint was translated from copies of the Hebrew Tanakh written by Jewish priests living within the city of Alexandria, Egypt. Alexandria had a large Jewish community in the 1st century, with some estimates suggesting that Jews made up 40% of the city's total population. The authors of the Septuagint, as learned men living within a culturally Hellenic city, would have been very familiar with the Greek epics written by poets such as Homer and Hesiod. It is from Homer that we get the first mention of the gigantes. In Homer's Odyssey, Odysseus and his small fleet of 12 ships arrive at the island of Lamos, commonly believed to be located somewhere around modern-day Sicily. Lamos is home to the Laestrygonians, said to be the descendants of a sea god Poseidon. Odysseus, upon arriving, sends 3 men on land to find out what kind of people inhabit the island. The men soon encounter a young woman who is the daughter of the king of the island, a giant named Antiphates. She directs them to her father's house, where the following account ensues.
When they got there, they found his wife to be a giantess as huge as a mountain, and they were horrified at the sight of her. She had once called her husband Antiphates from the place of assembly, and forthwith he set about killing my men. He snatched up one of them, and began to make his dinner off him then and there, whereon the other 2 ran back to the ships as fast as ever they could. But Antiphates raised a hue and cry after them, and thousands of sturdy Laestrygonians sprang up from every quarter, ogres, not men. They threw vast rocks at us from the cliffs as though they had been mere stones, and I heard the horrid sound of the ships crunching up against one another, and the death cries of my men, as the Laestrygonians speared them like fishes and took them home to eat them.
Here, the giants are described as mighty cannibals, capable of launching boulders like stones and spearing men like fish. Other Greek authors describe the giants in the following ways. Thucydides, a Greek poet writing in the 6th century BC, remarks on the arrogance of the giants, noting,
"Not even the giants, who once upon a time had strength of their own, escaped the gods' wrath, but were overcome by their own arrogance."
Alcman, a 7th century BC poet, writes,
"For even the giants, who suffered unforgettable punishments for the evil they did, were not spared by the gods."
Now how does all this relate to the Nephilim? Returning to 1st Enoch, we are told that after the fall of the Watchers,
there was great impiety and much fornication, and they went astray, and all their ways became corrupt.
and that the wives of the Watchers,
They became pregnant, and they bared great giants, whose height was 3,000 ells, who consumed all the acquisitions of men. And when men could no longer sustain them, the giants turned against them and devoured mankind. And they began to sin against birds and beasts and reptiles and fish, and to devour one another's flesh and drink the blood.
We also have another source outside of the book of Enoch that mentions the size of the Nephilim. In the canonical book of Numbers, 12 spies sent by Moses into the land of Canaan describe the Anakites, a tribe living in Canaan, as follows.
There we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, who come of the Nephilim, and we were in our own sight as grasshoppers, and so we were in their sight.
Similarities between the giants of Judaic tradition and those described in the Greek epics are clear. Both speak of the evil of the giants, specifically noting their cannibalism, arrogance, and impiety, not to mention their immense size. In my opinion, the editors of the Septuagint would likely view the gigantes of Homeric myth and the Nephilim of the Tanakh as synonymous. However, this raises another question. The Septuagint and Book of Enoch were written centuries after the likes of Homer and Alcman. How can we know for certain that the authors were transcribing an oral tradition that had existed for millennia, and were not reinterpreting myths syncretized from the dominant Hellenic culture of that period? Unfortunately, we can't know for certain. The question of the Septuagint and Tanakh as a reliable account of the history of the Jewish people has been a source of scholarly contention for decades. It is my opinion that the giant phenomenon is a product of syncretism between Jewish and Hellenic religious beliefs, specifically within the city of Alexandria. Now that the question of what the Nephilim are and how they came to be known as giants has been answered, in my next video I'll dive deep into the topic, attempting to unveil the specific identities of the Watchers. by cross-referencing Judaic and Hellenic myth and religion. I'll also attempt to answer the age-old question as to whether there is any historical truth to these claims, and if so, chronologically date the events in question. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button below and subscribe for more videos on comparative mythology.